have a question for you. Does God belong in the workplace? Does God belong in business? That's what I'm going to be talking about with my guest today, Jeanne Stafford, who is all about the devotion factor. And we're going to find out what that means in work, play, and our personal and professional lives. Welcome, Jeanne.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you for having me and for that amazing, provocative question. What belongs in the workplace and life is a connection to something eternal. Mm-hmm. You decide what that is. And something eternal, something, to define that for people is something that's been here before you were born and will be here after you're no longer here. We get our egos ahead of us. And in order to be rooted in this very, very complicated, chaotic, turbulent, yet abundant world, it is our responsibility to feel rooted in what we're for and why we're here and our purpose. And the devotion factor helps my clients manage their time. Mm-hmm. The devotion factor is about the management of time. Managing time with such intention that you can, get done what you want to be getting done. So
what does devotion have to do with time?
Well, it is chosen. The history of devotion lies in doing. It's one of the roots of the word devotion is doer, ironically. And to choose what you're going to do is to be devoted to it. I focus on devoted leaders. I've worked with devoted leaders. I study people who are devoted, whose lives are the sum of their experiences. They live this way. And so, yeah.
Very interesting. You recently wrote a provocative article that was very thought-provoking. It was profound. It was extremely well written, as many of your articles are, as well as your books. And you wrote about being able to fully express yourself at work, writing, in columns, in books. What does that look like to you?
Well, what I wrote about was being released from my contract by Forbes, where I was a contributor for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely adored the opportunity. I treated it with a tremendous amount of respect. I was grateful for the opportunity to be there, to be in the midst of other leaders. And I came to Forbes and I was invited to be a contributor because of the sum of my experience and my work. And as you said, the things I've written a lot out in the world. I've contributed to a lot of articles. I do a lot of speaking. I coach, 80% of my time is invested in that. And I was brought to Forbes for that point of view, for a point of view that was that is born from the sum of my experiences in the political world, as a mother, as a woman in business, a business owner, a professional speaker. So I was brought for that. And when I was let go in December, I was full of, ultimately shock. Mm-hmm. And there was a bit of shame. And it was a mass layoff. It wasn't personal, yet I had treated it and revered it in such a way that it hit me that way. So what did I do with my own teaching, my own devotion factor? I took the time to understand what it was I was feeling. I took the time to understand what my value was, what my worthiness was to this institution. I took the time to remember who I was before I went there. Mm-hmm. And I used that post to take a risk during Holy Week. One of the things I share with people is the devotion factor is about making time every single day for what you're for, something eternal, and then everything you want to educate yourself around with that. And the third is to keep going, never give up. And we give our time away quite mindlessly. So I did something provocative. I talked about Holy Week, and I said, why am I talking about Holy Week? I'm talking about Holy Week because my Catholic faith is important to me. And what is most important to me and where do I give my time to is a question I ask my clients. And their answers are always so beautiful when they talk about what really is the key for their lives. And we magnify that and work toward that. So I launched the blog really at the prodding of my publisher, who said, start getting out there and start using all these platforms in a way that, in an experimental way. And I'm at root, I'm an improviser, as you know. So that's why I took the risk. And that's
very interesting. How do you apply devotion in your life? You gave an example of it by putting out this particular blog post. What does that mean in Jeanne's life on a daily basis?
Well, when I look at devotion, I focus on my devotions. I focus on what's essential to me. And what's essential to me is my relationship with God and myself and my two children, and how I take care of those particular areas and bring more joy to the world. And so as a result, I focus on a lot of people who I study and learn from people who help me improve that and improve the way I put it out into the world.
Could someone who did not believe in God benefit from the devotion factor?
Absolutely. One of my grandmother's favorite poems was Trees by Joyce Kilmer. And it is about the life of a tree and what is important about it. And when I was a little girl and listened to her recite that poem to me, I connected more deeply with trees, and I connected more deeply with, as a result, sunrises and sunsets and the gift of a day. And something eternal is, again, something that will always be here. If you are, a majority of my clients are not Catholic and don't even go to church. What they are is one of my clients is hired me to leave a large financial services firm and launch his own firm. And and he is very young, less than 35 years old, father of 4, and a surfer. And he launched a holistic model for financial services based on what is important to his clients, the things that are important to him, being of service to his children, connecting deeply with the earth and the nature of waves and back and forth. So we incorporated all of that into it. What is this man devoted to? Love. He's devoted to the love of his family. He's devoted for his love to his love of the ocean, and the ocean is eternal. It will be here forever. And that's one example of where devotion shows up beyond its past traditional understanding. And we live in a world right now where people really need that word, because devotion is all encompassing. It says, today is the day I am going to make time for what I love in the world and how I want to show up. I'm going to be more curious about the things that are important to me. And I'm going to extend an invitation to more people to learn more about that and build things together. I would say this conversation right here is a direct example of that. That you are exactly that. And you and I have turned into that kind of collaborative partnership in all that we do and share with others.
So now, are you suggesting that people take what they're devoted to and somehow translate that into their business life? And what does that look like?
Yes. Well, the conversations you have in life are important to understand. And the most important conversation is the conversation you have in your head and your heart. There's 18 inches between, your head and your heart. And that 18-inch space needs more of your attention than most of us give it. And when you understand what's important to you, more of how you work, you are able to, for example, remove things from your life that no longer serve this purpose of yours. When you have a conversation with your head and your heart about what you love and it brings you joy, you're able to share that with the world. And when you're able to share it with the world, you feel better. And feeling better is a really good thing to understand about yourself. A lot of us are so busy finding the joy outside and thinking we'll get it, but you can get it immediately in the morning. One of the practices I work on for myself and encourage my clients to do is get up as early as humanly possible and allot a certain amount of time to what you love. Is it reading? I have clients that love to read biographies of famous presidents, or biographies of famous CEOs, or biographies of famous people in the area they were in, or someone they know nothing about. And when you start your morning with that, it's beautiful. A lot of people start their morning with meditation. A lot of people start their morning with a good old walk outside, convening with something eternal. And a lot of people start their morning with prayer. So how you start helps to set the course for a day that you're given.
How do you define, or how would you perceive the difference between what messages you might get from your heart versus your brain?
Well, silence in meditation or prayer can be noisy. And the noise is usually coming from the brain. The things that we believe have to happen, the things we're judging about what didn't happen. So what we want to do is, whatever messages you're getting, you want to pay attention to. And the noise is the brain, the heart is the love, and love hurts, right? Love hurts because it's informing you. It's giving you information about something you need to learn and understand better. And what I train people to understand about the devotion factor is, when you do this, you're able to navigate times that feel you're in a sense of judgment, cynicism, sarcasm, or fear. It's not about eliminating all of this and living in a state of kumbaya. It's because I'll tell you right now, when I go to church and pray, or I sit in the morning and pray, it'd be a heck of a lot easier to just stay there. I know my client who surfs and my client who chooses to walk, these beautiful paths around the world and convene with nature. I know he'd love to do that for the rest of his life. And I know he's figured out, got to go back to the world, right? These are all examples of devotion. And so what you do is you suddenly realize, by this practice of devotion, by this practice of repeated action, by this practice of intention, you release inside of you what St. Augustine referred to as interior freedom. And you ultimately make more room for more abundance in your life, the right choices, and less noise, less busyness, less things on the to-do list.
Now, you mentioned getting up as early as possible.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, it's been.
Does that include taking a nap in the afternoon or going to bed?
Look, we have to understand what we need. We have to understand what works for us. And if you are a night person, I know people who get a lot of incredible work done at night. Getting emails from somebody who's worked from 12 to 1 o'clock in the morning. They've figured out that's their sweet spot, and that's what's important to them. Your job is to figure it out. A huge majority of people do find this adrenaline rush in the morning. They do find this connection to their clarity in the morning. This is documented by many scientists, and still, we have to figure out what's important to us. And there are scientists who say, when you get up, when you find your sweet spot for getting up in the morning, you're able to navigate if you drink X amount of glasses of water and you hold off on your coffee, or you stick to this schedule, you don't have a dip in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say, a majority of people tell me that works for them when I share this science with them. And then a lot of people will say, well, I'm really a night person and I prefer this. Got to know what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then own it. The important thing is you stick to getting things done in that special sweet spot. And
so you're proposing that when you find your sweet spot, that's when you should be doing what you're devoted to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
part of the idea, I guess, is to make sure you get to that devotion. If you woke up early and you did it first thing in the morning before the day started,
yes,
you would at least know you got yourself motivated through your devotion factor.
yes. Here it is. When we wake up and our first thought is about that guy at the office who sucks the energy out of the room, you want to catch yourself, right? But when you wake up and say, I'm not going to look at my emails, I'm not going to look at my texts, I'm going to follow this pattern that brings me joy, that makes me feel curious, that ignites my brain, that helps me feel, essentially what's happening right now in the world, we're giving so much of our time away to these beautiful devices. We're mindlessly using the tools of today. At times we could be using this tool and this tool to enrich our lives, to further the narrative we wish to share with the world. And so it's a conscious choosing.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people get up and listen to a coach in the morning, listen to a recording of something that helps inspire them to get going.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point.
How did you come to this?
I came to it.
Yeah.
I came to it not knowing I was coming to it, which is all great, discoveries. I wrote a book over 10 years ago called Think, Drink, Eat, Move, 4 Steps to Yes. Because when I first started my training business and coaching business and speaking business, I did it from the lens of an improviser. Mm-hmm. For over 20 years, I studied and performed improv comedy in New York City. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about the conversations we have in our head and our heart, and the most powerful conversations we can have to be productive at work. And I gave these workshops. And after I gave the workshops, people would come up to me afterward and ask me questions about my personal life. What was my practice? What do you do? How do you do it? How do you discipline your children? How do you, what kind of exercise do you like? They asked me very personal questions, and I would sort of, wave it off. And then I realized it'd be fun to write a book. So in 2 weeks, I wrote this book, and it's 4 chapters: Think, Drink, Eat, Move. And in each chapter, I wrote about how I think. And then at the end of the chapter, I wrote suggestions about what the person reading it could learn about how they could think. And there was a journaling section. So Think, Drink, Eat, Move. In the Move chapter, I wrote about the power of movement. I am a walker. Mm-hmm. I can outwalk almost every person I know except you. Because you are a walker too. And I love to walk. So I define that as moving, that mm-hmm. if something seems unfathomable, if something seems like, your brain is spinning, a walk heals all things. It's motion, it's movement. And in this chapter, I further described that when I walking, I identify as a privilege. There are people on this planet who can't walk. Mm-hmm. And in saying to yourself, it is a privilege to be able to walk, why don't you walk in the name of someone who can't? Devote the time you make to walk in the name of someone who can't.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. And that is where the devotion factor came in. Because I describe in the book how the act of walking and being in motion and giving it up for someone else improved my walk. It helped me go longer. improved my ability to not even listen to anything when I was walking, but to convene with what I was seeing when I was walking, and extend an invitation to new things. So that's where the devotion factor was born. I went back to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of shift is very powerful. I remember after having my first plane crash, the first thing, like less than 24 hours later, I was managing a health club and I had a customer who was really upset about something, yelling. And I remember looking at them thinking, wow, if I didn't get through that plane crash yesterday, I wouldn't be able to be enjoying this aggravation right now.
Yes, yes,
It's one of those little mental shifts you can make.
yes.
Can put everything into perspective.
Yes. And so my responsibility to, remind everybody listening, you said first plane crash. That is so
that's
huge.
another topic.
I know that's another story. And and that I will tell you that 2 days ago, I was on the elevator in my building and it's hot out, it's hotter in New York than it should be right now. And I don't like the heat. And I got on the elevator and the door opened at the next floor and a man got on and he had a very big brace on a leg. On one of his two legs. He had a very big brace on his arm, and he had a nurse who was bringing him onto the elevator. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "How are you? How was your day?" And I said, "Oh, it's pretty good, thank you. Could do without the heat." And he said, "Well, after spending a number of weeks in the back of a hospital in a dark room, I realized every day is a gift. No matter how hot or cold, every day is a gift." And I was like, Jeanne.
There's nothing like those moments
You're so right. Say it again.
There's nothing like those moments of perspective.
Yeah, truly nothing like it. And it really is a moment when it happens to you, your responsibility is not to be like, I gotta go. Right? Mm-hmm. Your responsibility is to say, this person came into my life because I wasn't on the phone. Mm-hmm. I said hello. I was ready to be, share eye contact with this lovely older man and have this moment, this exchange. Mm-hmm. He was profoundly peaceful and you could see the gratitude in his face. And I decided to take that with me all day long.
That's wonderful. It's, every time I have those debates, do I love New York? Do I hate New York? I would come back to the fact that I love New York and why. There's something about the people energy, those random moments that can happen as often as you want in New York. I mean, it's not like I've lived elsewhere that you're driving a lot and maybe you don't see as many people. In New York, if you wanted to have 100 of those moments a day, you could. All you have to do is look at someone. Now, they might say, "What are you looking at?" Like Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver. You're looking at me, or it might be like you get a smile back or you get, "Hey, how are you?"
Yeah. To that end, Diane, so appropriate that you brought that up. I was in the elevator getting in my car on the same day. I pull into, I'm trying to get a parking spot on the street in New York. And I was determined to get one, and not have to park in a garage. You and I can appreciate this. And so I was parking and all of a sudden I get into a side street and there's an ambulance and the ambulance has taken up enough. So there's just enough and I'm not sure if my car can get through. So I sat there waiting for about 2 minutes for the ambulance driver to come back. And I was like, forget it. I get out of the car and behind me is one of those Amazon scooters. And the guy is sitting in his little truck mini scooter. And I said, "Excuse me, could you guide me through there?" And he said, "Guide you? I'll show you." And I was like, okay. So he gets out of the scooter and he gets in front of my car and he does this. Right. And I mean, I had about a half an inch on each side. And this guy gently, and he gets me all the way through. And then I roll down the window when I get to the other side. And I was so relieved. And I said, "Thank you. I can't thank you enough. I never would have made it." And he said, "My pleasure. And remember, God loves you." I was like, what? I mean, out of the blue, the guy said,
I love it.
and I said,
What a
"Hey,
New
love
York
you,
moment.
Dad, and he loves you too." And it was exactly what you're talking about. A
Mhm.
completely random moment with a stranger I decided to enlist. And there were a lot of people who were cursing that ambulance. So believe me, there was a lot of noise, people were upset. And then all of a sudden that guy was the helper,
Yeah.
bringing everybody through so that they could get through. But it was another New York moment, just like what you're talking about.
What do you think it takes to be open to those moments?
Catching yourself if you want to be ticked off. I could have.
That's easy.
I had a few choices. I could have sat in my car, put it in park, gotten on my phone.
Mhm.
I could have sat in my car beeping. I could have sat in my car being angry and looking around and wondering when that person was coming. I gave that about 90 seconds. And the work I do with clients, I always say, give yourself 90 seconds to be really ticked.
Mhm.
And I really do consciously practice this, where I stopped myself and I looked around and I thought, this guy must be able to help. And in the back of my mind thinking, I really hope I can get through this little spot, and everything was aligned. Everything was purposeful. So how did I get there? Because I practiced this, I think. And obviously that guy did too, right? Obviously that driver did. And obviously that man in the elevator did too. So that's a very important thing to make the point here, that when you know what you're for, you're able to get through the suffering the world hits us with every single day. And suffering, it can be clearly defined as anything that goes wrong, that sets you off your track, that isn't what you planned. There's always something on the other side of it.
When you reflect on life, what do you think the biggest thing you've learned that has brought you to these realizations you're sharing today?
I never give up. It's part of my personality. I never give up. And I had a high school drama teacher tell me something incredibly powerful that I recently returned to, because we have to understand ourselves. What is our true nature? What is it we need to be more aware of about the gifts we've been given? And I was on a stage during a rehearsal, and I was one of this group on stage. What do you call that when it's a whole bunch of people in the
Chorus, a collective.
like a collective, a chorus.
Yeah.
And I was not a star. I didn't have any standout role, nothing. And I was sitting there and in this rehearsal, and my drama teacher was incredibly strict, and she screamed, "Stop! Everybody stop! Everybody up there is acting as if they're somewhere else. There's only one person on stage who is alive in the space. And that is Jeanne." I was like, I immediately felt guilty for being
Engaged.
That's my Irish Catholic personality, right? I immediately felt guilty for being like, the good girl, or the one that got it right. I'll be honest, that's exactly what I felt. And then I probably carried that guilt for a long time, to be honest. And there were all these significant people on stage. They were all these very good actors. But later on in life, as I went back and looked at her, when she passed away, and I started studying some of the things I learned with her and some of the great things she taught me, that phrase came to me, alive in the space. So I decided to become more self-aware about Jeanne, that Jeanne's alive in the space. And that's one of the things that helps me keep going, no matter what goes wrong. And there are a lot of things that go wrong in my life, just like everybody else. And I really, really, really default to what feels good about being alive in the space. It's part of my natural energy.
That's a great story and a great example. It reminds me when our daughter was in, I guess it was 9th grade, she was playing volleyball, and she came home one day and she says, "Mom, my volleyball game got a lot better today." I'm like, okay. Today, not like over time, it was today. So I said, "Well, what happened today?" She goes, "Well, Coach Spooner said to me," and our daughter was very thespian, into acting, performing, being on stage, said to her, "Shamini, if you were on Broadway and asked to play a professional volleyball player, would you be playing like you're playing today?
Wow.
And she's like, no.
What
And
a
he
great
goes, well,
coach.
could you bring that performance to the court today?
I love that.
And that little coaching from a very well-known, local coach shifted everything in her mind that, you know what, I'm playing volleyball today. And how would a professional volleyball player, that visualization step, and it
Yeah.
made all the difference in her game. And she proceeded to go on and have the most unusual style, but she slayed on the volleyball court.
Isn't that something? Well, he tapped into her devotion factor.
Yes.
That's a great coach.
Yeah.
Someone who can see what someone loves and how they
Mhm.
express themselves when they love it. And he brought it to where she could do something more with it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect example. I love that story. Isn't it a gift when our children encounter teachers and coaches like that? It's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So these always go fast. And as I mentioned, my audience has asked me to keep them a little shorter for their workouts, which maybe they're not doing them first thing in the morning. They're doing them late at night when they're tired.
Who knows? Maybe they choose to listen to you in the morning first thing. How great would that be?
So what would you give as closing advice before buy your books, follow your podcast, tune into there will be all kinds of links, but what would you give everyone as a parting factor that they could walk away today from this podcast saying, this is what I'm going to try to apply today forward based on what I learned from Jeanne Stafford?
Yeah, today and over the next week, find 1 to 3 things you can remove from your life so that you can pay attention to what is essential in your life. 1 to 3 things. And if you, at the end of this week, remove one thing from your life and attach it to more space in your life for what's essential, congratulate yourself. Well done. Good job.
That is such a good one. And now I have to extend this podcast a moment. It reminded me years ago, here that John Lennon, Ronald Reagan, and the Pope were shot was right between 80 and 81, something like that.
I remember.
80, 81.
Yeah.
And, but it was very consecutive and it was very shocking. I had just gotten out of high school. It was like, whoa, what's going on in the world? Kind of like people say every day, no matter what time in history you are, what's going on in the world, a universal question. But I remember saying, I'm not going to read the newspaper. I only read Ann Landers and the comics and Brenda Starr. That was all. That was it. And I wrote my horoscope. And I was going to skip all the other pages. And that worked really well until I started an investor relations firm. And obviously I really had to, I had 400 clients over the years, really had to pay attention to the news that might impact any of our clients or one of their competitors, and things like that. And then at one point I stopped again and I said, you know what? This is not helping me on a daily basis to pay attention to all this news. It's beyond my control. It really impacts my mood. And the fact is, if there's something I should know, somebody's going to let me know. So at one point I made all my employees read the news and would say, listen, you're in charge of this portion of the news. You're in charge of this portion. I gave everybody a delegation. And then the next week or month, they were allowed to switch up with someone, to their genre. And I'd say, pull out what I might need to really know and put it in this file on my desk. But otherwise, I skipped it. And it's funny, now I'm back to doing the same thing because I figure if there's something in the world I really need to know, somebody's going to make sure they tell me because they know she's back to not reading the news.
Yes, yes. I follow the same rule. It's very freeing.
It is. And you know what else? I can't believe how much more time I have since I started to skip read headlines.
And time is so beautiful.
Yes.
Especially when used well.
And it's not just time to me, it's energy. I value my energy more than my time because time I can almost replicate. I can give other people, I can hire people to help do things that replicate time for me. But my energy that I bring into any moment, that I can't replicate. That's all me. So I have to preserve it. I have to protect it. I have to allocate it accordingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
So, oh my gosh, Jeanne, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Everybody, this has been the Silver Disobedience Perception Dynamics podcast, and I'm Dian Griesel, the host. Jeanne Stafford has been my guest today. There are going to be all kinds of links so you can follow her, stay in touch, pick up her books, because you're going to want to do that, and you're going to want to share this with with your friends, because there's been great info throughout this episode. So please hit subscribe. Say goodbye to Jeanne. Jeanne and I are moving over to the green room. And thank you, Jeanne.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, everybody. Hit subscribe and follow those links below.